Barrie.
Welcome to Educate, Inform, and Challenge. My name is Teresa MacLennan. I'm Executive Director of the Women and Children Shelter of Barrie. We are so glad that you are here with us today. We have a great show, and we really just want you to come along in this journey with us. The purpose of our show, of course, is to talk about the lives and experiences of women and men. We also talk about women in leadership and politics, decision-making, violence against women, and human trafficking. And with that, we always want to caution our viewers, please be very mindful of your own self-care as you listen to our conversation today. We will be talking about sensitive issues and material. We want you to be well, and if you need to take a break from this conversation, please do so. Before we begin also, we always want to thank and acknowledge our Indigenous community, your history, your culture. We thank you so much for allowing us to be in this space, to share this space, and to have an opportunity in this space to have these conversations. We thank you. So today, I'm so glad you're with us because we have a wonderful guest speaker. I am so happy to interview my friend, Mikhaela Gray-Beerman, and she's going to talk to us today about human trafficking locally and globally, and we're really going to dive into the incredibly great work that she is doing. So Mikhaela, welcome. So glad to see you today.
Well, thank you so much, Teresa, for having me here. It's just a joy and a privilege to be able to share with you and your viewers.
Thank you. So I know you wear a multitude of hats, Mikhaela. Do you want to tell our viewers a little bit about yourself?
Yes, definitely. So firstly, I am a wife to a very loving spouse, and I'm currently enjoying the very precious gift of motherhood. I also have the immense joy of being a follower of Jesus, and I love nature. I love the outdoors. I love the arts. And I left my career at a university about 3.5 years ago to pursue anti-trafficking work full-time. And I just wanted to shed light before we get into this conversation, because I think it's really important for me upfront to say that I am not someone who has experienced trafficking. And I am an individual who hopes to come alongside those who have experienced exploitation and support them in whatever way they identify. And also, the reason I began this work in the first place is because of a person who had experienced trafficking and their experience here in Ontario. At the age of just 14, they experienced exploitation, and they were my mother's childhood best friend. And when I heard her story and learned about the experiences that she faced, it's heartbreaking. It's still something that impacts her today. And my hope is that through this work, through conversations like this, we can help prevent other people from experiencing the kind of exploitation that she faced.
Mikhaela, I want you to know how much I just really appreciate that sharing. And I think it puts a great context to our conversation today for folks, well, first, our viewers to realize that human trafficking locally and globally is such a real thing. It's happening right here in our community, and here in our women's and children's shelter. We have trafficked women here all the time. Mm-hmm. And I am so respectful of your journey and your motivation about doing this work, because it is so heartfelt for you, I think, right? But you've taken this experience and now it has motivated into action. And so that's what I want to talk about is so let's start there. Talk to us about the work that you are doing.
Well, every day looks very, very different. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to be involved in so many diverse ways and support so much excellent work that is happening locally and globally. I think it's helpful to reference that after I learned about my mom's childhood best friend's story, there was a lot of different steps that took place over years before I left my career, before I took the plunge into being involved full time. And part of that included me spending a month in India and completing my master's thesis at York University. My master's in education focused on human trafficking. And I also wanted to clarify that there are many different kinds of trafficking, such as labor trafficking, forced organ removal, forced marriage. The focus of my work over these years has been sex trafficking and sexual exploitation, and continues to be so. So our conversation today will just be focused on that type of trafficking. And I just wanted to provide that context. But currently I'm involved in a number of different diverse ways. I think of a research project I'm currently involved in, where we're looking at the experiences of 53 people impacted by the sex industry across Canada, and understanding what contributed to their involvement, what experiences did they face while they were impacted by the industry, and then what are their dreams, what are their future hopes. And really amazingly, one of the findings is just a focus on motherhood and just the importance of motherhood for people who are exiting that situation. I currently serve as an advisory team member for Defend Dignity. That's a national organization that's focused on ending sexual exploitation across Canada. I'm also on the board of Bridge North, which is led by a survivor, Cassandra Diamond, and also the president, Karen Todd, in York Region, that's addressing the trafficking of persons there. I'm also involved in prevention, education, and research for an organization that's actually out west called Brave Education for Trafficking Prevention. I host a local television show focused on trafficking and having conversations to raise awareness and to ask advocates their experiences. People with lived experience can share their insights and knowledge as well, and just having a platform to raise awareness in our community locally. There's an organization I support right now in California called Dance Awareness, No Child Exploited, and it actually highlights how the dance industry can sometimes exploit children through music, costumes, and choreography. And right now I'm supporting them with a project where we're actually interviewing survivors who were impacted by both hypersexualized dance as children and then later sex trafficked in life. Also, I'm involved in outreach in the community in areas where sexual exploitation is known to occur, to provide connection, supports, and resources to people who may be looking for such things, as well as journeying alongside some folks who have exited situations of exploitation. And then there's a committee that I'm a part of where we help to raise awareness and funds through a local church for local and global trafficking efforts. So like I said, every given day is different, and sometimes new opportunities come in, or someone will connect with me and just to have a conversation to see how we can collaborate and work together. But I'm always looking for opportunities to share my time and my gifts and the knowledge that I'm continuing to grow in to be able to help others who are committed to this work.
Mikhaela, that is incredible work that you're doing, and it's very broad, and it's meeting different needs when we're talking about human trafficking. I'm really interested in that initial piece that you talked about that research and following those women or people, men and women, who've had an experience of human trafficking. What is your thoughts about how you're going to use that research moving forward once you've collected it and analyzed it?
Yeah, so we're actually in the publishing process. It's in press right now, so it's been accepted by the journal. And so we're just doing those kind of final rounds of back and forth with the editor. And my hopes is that it will be used on multiple fronts. I think research is definitely needed in this area to help demonstrate the experiences of individuals so that we can create policy and we can create resources and supports that are evidence informed to better understand how can we prevent this from happening, but also what is needed. What are people with lived experience saying would be helpful to them in their healing? So for example, this research highlights how financial need is a great barrier to being able to exit. And so having diverse and robust exit services, including mental health and trauma supports and substance use recovery. So there's all these different things that come out of the findings. And so my hopes is that it will help with government allocation of resources, but also to strengthen our policies and our laws and legislation to make sure that our laws in Canada reflect and uphold the dignity of persons.
I love what you're talking about is really intersectionality. And, from the work that we do here at the shelter, when women come in and they've primarily experienced sexual exploitation in terms of human trafficking, there are so many intersections for them that create barriers for them to be able to leave. And so we fully understand the reasons behind the decisions that they make in needing to stay in human trafficking. And I think our viewers know, and I've shared this before, is that as an agency, our shelter, we never create barriers for women to come in, which means we have women who come into our shelter who are still actively involved in human trafficking for so many reasons. Mental health needs, financial needs, like you spoke about, a huge one, and also substance use needs, because we find that addiction and human trafficking can go very hand in hand, especially sexual exploitation. I just really appreciate that perspective that you've offered. I think that research is going to be invaluable, because I think, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, we don't know as much as we need to know about human trafficking, do we?
That's right. We don't know as much as we need to know. It's a very clandestine and under-researched topic. That being said, there is more and more research happening. I think Dr. Robert Christmas in Manitoba, who's recently committed research to this topic. So it's emerging, but there's definitely a need to understand this issue from all the different perspectives through Defend Dignity as well. There's another research project that I'm assisting with kind of on the outside, but looking at the buyers, the people who are purchasing sex, because that's a whole other side of things, right? The demand that is driving sex trafficking in our communities. But there are so many topics from understanding, how can movement therapy assist people in their healing and journey, to understanding the impacts of colonialism and patriarchy on perpetuating issues of trafficking in our community, to doing research on what kind of online safeguards and educations are actually going to help prevent kids from being exploited in their communities. Like, there is endless research topics. And as trafficking continues to change based on how technology is flourishing in our community, we need research to support and adapt how we are approaching things. And then one more thought about research is just that the importance of ensuring that people who have actually experienced exploitation, that their voices are reflected. And I think research is a really great opportunity for that, because people can remain anonymous. They can share the information that they would like and disclose what they would like, but also withhold information if they would like. And then their voice is also being used for that policy change and funding opportunity that is so needed.
And I love that. I love everything that you're saying, because it really, you're speaking my language. Because I often say when I'm speaking, so much like your disclosure, I've never experienced human trafficking. I can speak from an administrative point of view, from my conversations and my experiences with women that we've supported in human trafficking. My voice will never be as strong as a woman who has that kind of lived experience. So for men and women who have been trafficked in any kind of regard, I so value the importance of hearing from them, having them tell us what it is that they needed to remove themselves from being trafficked, what they felt that they needed, and also the indicators about what led them into that path in the first place. It is so critical. And I love that you are really recruiting and asking people with lived experience to share that with us, to help educate us about how we create different policies and procedures and practices that support them. So we're going to take a very quick commercial break. We're going to come right back. Please stay with us for this great conversation with Mikhaela. We'll see you in just a minute.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
You're watching Rogers TV, Barrie.
Looking for the best way to get the Major League Baseball games you want to watch? Rogers Super Sports Pack has you covered. With MLB Extra Innings, you'll have a premium ticket to out-of-market regular season games with all games available in HD. Don't miss the action from the games you want from both the American and National Leagues. MLB Extra Innings, part of the Super Sports Pack. For only $35.95 a month, Rogers customers get all this for one all-inclusive price. Order using your remote starting on channel 431 or visit Rogers.com today.
Welcome back to our conversation today with my friend Mikhaela Gray-Beerman, and we are really diving into the conversations about human trafficking locally, but also from a global perspective, which is critical for us to do that. A lot of folks in our community don't understand, don't realize the high numbers of human trafficking. So Mikhaela, can you help put that into perspective for us? Do you have any stats? What does that look like either locally or globally that you can share with us?
Yeah, so human trafficking is unfortunately an issue that impacts every community in Barrie, Simcoe County, Ontario, Canada, and around the world. I think one of the myths that still needs to be combated is that people have different misconceptions, often because of media and films, of how trafficking takes place and where trafficking takes place, but recognizing it does look different in different contexts and situations, but that it's an issue that impacts people all over the world. In terms of statistics and kind of what's happening locally and globally. First, I just want to share that statistics are helpful in getting an understanding of this issue, but also there's gaps because we know that it is an under-researched topic, that because of the criminal and clandestine nature of the issue, that it's hard to get exact numbers. And so that's an area of need, statistical evidence that continues to grow. But based on what we have, here are some numbers to shed light. Also, before I share numbers, I do want to help folks as they're listening, remember that these statistics represent people, individual people. I think sometimes when we hear numbers and things like that, we can forget that these are like each person has a unique experience and that their life matters, that their life is so important. And you know, this egregious violation happening to one person is one person too many. So I just kind of wanted to frame that because I think that's really important to share. So in Canada and around the world, so there's commonalities. We know that trafficking disproportionately impacts women and children. We know that men are also impacted by trafficking, but disproportionately it's women and children. And this is how disproportionate it is. Out of all the incidents that reported in Canada in 2019, 95% were women and girls. That's from Statistics Canada, 95%. That is a vast majority. And sadly, most perpetrators here in Canada are men, and the statistic is 85% at this time. We know that more than 1 in 5 individuals who are impacted by this crime were girls under the age of 17, and 43% were young women aged 18 to 24. So as we reflect on these things, 95% women and girls, and then we look at 85% men, we see the gendered nature and the inequalities and imbalance and the patriarchal structure even of how sex trafficking is continuing to flourish in our country. Other statistics that I think are helpful in just understanding who this crime impacts. In the study that I mentioned that I recently undertook through Defend Dignity, one of the individuals started experiencing exploitation at the young age of 2 years old. 2 years old. We have instances of familial trafficking where there's intergenerational trauma and trafficking taking place. And then if we think about specifically our Indigenous community, statistics really vary in the literature in Canada. but it indicates that anywhere between 50 to 70% of people who are impacted by sex trafficking in Canada identify as Indigenous, yet less than 4% of Canada's population is Indigenous. That also sheds light on the colonial structures that perpetuate trafficking here that need to be addressed. Additionally, we know that trafficking is increasingly happening online. And just even as I was reflecting on a news article this week, like this is really heavy, because we know that trafficking is happening inside our homes. Someone doesn't necessarily have to be moved from place to place, from border to border. Like it can be happening within the confines of your home. We know that the rate of online child sexual abuse and online sexual exploitation in Canada has more than doubled since 2014, more than doubled. So we need to be equipping parents with resources on online safety and tools, but also equipping young people with what are online boundaries and what does a safe relationship look like in terms of context of meeting people and building friendships online. And I mean, there's so many layers, but how do we build safeguards and have conversations where kids are able to understand and we're able to communicate in a way to understand and acknowledge that unfortunately there are more and more perpetrators online who are grooming and seeking to exploit kids online. And that was just shedding light on Canada alone. When we look at the globe, I mean, the numbers it's hard to even fathom. I mean, stats range from over 40 million people being trafficked around the world. And again, often women and children. And I think about even forms of trafficking like cyber sex trafficking, which we know is rampant in the Philippines, for example, and that often Canadians and people in the United States are the purchasers who are driving the demand for cyber sex trafficking. Just to shed light on like one more global statistic is that in 2018, according to the United Nations recent report on looking at trafficking around the world, for every 10 people who were detected being trafficked around the world, about 5 were adult women and 2 were girls, and about 1/3 of the overall detected people were children. And so, you know, this is a crime that impacts women and children and men, people from different gender identities and backgrounds. The LGBTQ community is overrepresented with trafficking. And so we see that traffickers are often looking and praying for individuals who are experiencing other forms of oppression in our community. So that there is much that we can do to help stand against this injustice, both in our own community and to stand up and support those who are being trafficked around the world.
I think that really helps to put it into perspective. And I agree with you in that we do need to take the numbers maybe with a grain of salt. I mean, we've always known that the amount of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls is so highly under reported. And there's so many more women from that community who we know have been murdered due to violence or human trafficking, right? And there's so much that's underreported. Why do you think that is? What are the challenges for anyone to come forward having an experience of human trafficking or accessing service? Why are we not able to get the truer data to that?
Well, as you were commenting and sharing, it made me reflect even on there's a emerging researcher, Ana Lucia, who's doing amazing work to uplift the voices of men and boys who have been trafficked and sheds light on the barriers that they face to disclosure and why perhaps we see stats like 95% of women and girls when there could be a lot more boys and men, but there are maybe barriers to disclosing. I think it's so complicated in terms of when we talk about barriers for disclosure, because there's so many things from are there opportunities for people to be accessing services in their community where the service provider knows and understands the nuances and complexities of trafficking and definitions and individual experiences to be able to provide that support? There's even barriers in terms of how that service provider may then report the statistics based on their knowledge and definition. So there's some gaps in that way. I think that there can also be barriers in terms of there are people who share and then are not believed or heard. There are times when people feel afraid because of threats and coercion, and that if anyone finds out about their experience, that it could happen to them again or a family member. I think that also that, like, as I reflect on my changing understanding of exploitation, it's that an individual can self-identify in diverse ways. And what I mean by that is that someone may experience exploitation at one point in their journey and then later feel like they may be in a position where they're exercising choice and then exploited or entering an exploitive situation later. And so depending on the time when you talk to them about their experience, that also may be different in how they report or disclose their experience. So there's so many nuances and complexities, and that makes it, I think, all very difficult in terms of ensuring there's disclosures and that we're accurately able to convey what's actually happening on the ground.
Mikhaela, it's just such a great conversation. It's so helpful for our community because being aware and being informed is how we can take action and support the work that you're doing in particular. You know what, we have about 4 minutes left right now. I want to ask you just a couple of questions that I think might be helpful. Why should our community care about human trafficking?
Well, why should people care about human trafficking? I think I have to bring it back to the individual. And what I mean by that is, like, each person is made with a purpose. Each person is made with love and care. And each person deserves to live a life free of exploitation, to be able to understand their dignity, value, and worth. And so people should care because people matter. If you're listening, you matter. And each individual who is experiencing or who has experienced trafficking matters. And so people can be a part of doing something to help prevent this from happening to others, but also to come alongside and support those who are in their healing journey. Whether that's through time and volunteering, whether that's through giving financially to organizations like the Women and Children Shelter or Bridge North or Defend Dignity, or whether it's, learning and educating yourself, saying, I'm going to take this seriously. I'm going to learn, and then I'm going to share with others. I'm going to share with others at work or on my social media page, and I'm going to find resources and make them available. I'm going to share the human trafficking hotline, 1-833-900-1010 on my pages, have it available so that if someone is experiencing trafficking in my community, I know how to respond and support them. And I'm going to learn and be willing to find ways that I can advocate and support those who are experiencing exploitation. Like, people should care because people matter. And I think people deserve to know that there is hope and healing available for them.
I think that was just lovely, everything that you said. And there's such a value that we should place on everyone's life and have an understanding about trauma that people have experienced and how do we become allies. So I feel like everything that you just said really spoke to our viewers in our community. If there is a person right now who is watching our show who may wonder if they're actually being trafficked or may know that they are, what final words would you like to say to them?
Oh, that's a hard.
It's a heavy question. It's a big question.
It's a big question.
Yeah.
I think first, I would want them to know that their life matters, that their story matters, and that no matter what they faced, or even if they have confusion about defining their experience, that there are people who care. There are people who would love the opportunity to walk alongside you and to support you in your healing journey. and to know that you're not alone.
I think that's a really great place for us to end off. And we will share our crisis line with our viewers. If anyone is listening today who feels that they want to reach out and just speak to somebody about options, services, or just a listening ear. And there is a wide range of other options like the National Human Trafficking Hotline, which we will share that number as well. So Mikhaela, thank you so much for this conversation today. Please join us again next time, and just everyone take good care. Bye-bye.
Call the Rogers